So Ray Kurzweil, is he the godfather of AI? I think they call Jeffrey Hinton that, but he's like the guy everybody defers to about the future. I think he's the world's best known futurist. Bill Gates, all the guys at Google, Sam Altman, like they've all referenced him, talk about him, and so on. Unfortunately, he really doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to what a human is. Like, it's kind of sad because he's a really good inventor. He's made a bunch of cool stuff. And but he thinks we are going to become immortal by uploading ourselves into machines. This is one of the key themes of his book. What was the name of Kurzweil's book? Think
Wait, so
about
he's saying
it.
you could download your brain and then upload it somewhere else.
So yes, so his theory is that you are just a meat computer. Right? This is like a materialist understanding of the world. That everything that summarizes Rob is physical in nature. And therefore, if it's physical in nature, the substrate, the physical thing in which you're storing this information, is able to be changed from an organic thing, a physical brain, to a non-organic, a silicon computer. I think I'm actually describing this very accurately. I'm not trying to misconstrue it. I'm not trying to set up a straw man. I'm I've read this from multiple sources. I I believe that is a accurate depiction of what his belief system is, and basically everybody who controls AI, guys at Google and OpenAI and Claude and like all of them are kind of in line with this concept. That another way of saying it is that your mind is a function of your brain. That makes sense? And you might even think that sounds reasonable. Unfortunately, science shows that's just not true. Let's go through a few examples because, that's always fun. In our book, we talk about three of them, but there's actually, I've learned about many more since we wrote the book, the Soul's Intelligence book. The one that I find is pretty compelling is near-death experiences of blind people. So people who are physically blind, they cannot see, have a near-death experience, they go to an operating room, and then they can describe in great detail things both in the operating room and outside of the operating room, like clothes that people are wearing in the waiting room. Things that there was one instance where a lady was able to describe a shoe that was untied sitting on a ledge outside of a hospital window, which to verify that she knew what she was talking about, somebody had to climb out a ledge and go down the side to find it. So, one, how the heck did that person get to that angle? But two, they were blind. How could they see a shoe? How could they? So, you'd have to have some sort of explanation of why that happened. Another one would be hydrocephalic patients. These are people with water in the brain, but there's very severe cases in which the cerebrospinal fluid replaces the brain almost entirely, that you can have less than 5% of gray matter. And yet, some of them, most of them are severely disabled, but some of them have IQs above 100 and leave normal lives, which doesn't work. If the brain is the seat of the mind, that shouldn't happen. Keep going through different examples. Penfield, he wrote a book back in the 70s called The Mystery of the Mind, where he did tests where he was a neurosurgeon. He'd cut up people's brains and he would talk to them while he was playing with their brains, which is just amazing to think about, right? And he would use electrical impulses to stimulate different parts of the brain. And he found by doing this that he could evoke emotions, he could uh, evoke motor skills like make the fingers move or an arm move or whatever else. He could trigger memories. Like the person would say, I know I'm like under surgery in the hospital right now, but like I feel like I'm at this place with my cousins, years ago. Um, what did I say? What was the fourth one then? Emotions, motor skills, sensations. Sorry. Um, so touch, like my fingers are tingly or I feel cold or that sort of thing. He found those are the only four things that they could put electrical impulses into a brain and get a reaction from. And you say, wait a sec, isn't that like kind of what humans are? Well, according to Thomas Aquinas from the 13th century, those are the things that make animals. They're called sensory, right? The sensitive soul is the soul that he describes as part of animals, which is different than the one in a tree. If you break a branch off a tree, we don't believe the tree is hurting or feels that pain. But if you break a leg off a dog, we know the dog's feeling that, right? But there's a different level to humans. What's the different level to humans, according to Aquinas? It's the rational soul, that the seat of intellect and rational thoughts, or abstract thoughts is another way of saying it, is only unique to humans. So if Thomas Aquinas was predicting what would happen when you put little electrodes on people's brains, he would say, yep, you can do senses. Yep, you can do emotions. Yep, you can do physical emotion, motor skills. And yep, you could do memories. However, he would say, but you won't affect rational thought. You won't get him to think of something abstract because those are seated in the soul.
Are you saying that inception is not possible? Because that is to change someone's rational thoughts, process stuff like the movie does.
Well, it's not possible with purely physical means.
Okay, that'd be interesting to see. Waiting for Ray Kurzweil to say, "Oh yeah, he could totally do that. Inception's possible." It'd be a good statement.
I mean, it's over to him. But our current, I mean, this is the guy, Penfield did this research 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, I think published the book in the 70s. Like, this has been pretty well established in the medical literature for quite a long time. And to my understanding, nobody has proven that they could instantiate a abstract thought by putting electrical impulses into the physical brain.
Let's think Kurzweil out here. According to Kurzweil, you'd be able to copy somebody's brain, put it into a machine, right? Okay.
Right.
So you copy my mind, you put it in the machine wakes up and I know I'm now the machine, right? Okay, so you make another copy, put it in this machine over there, it wakes up, it thinks it's me. This machine thinks it's me, this machine thinks it's me. I still think I'm me. I'm still me. Those are not me. I'm sorry, Ray, but you're an idiot. It doesn't work like that. I can make a photocopy of a picture, but it's not the same picture as the original. Ray, come on, this is basic stuff, man. This is like facsimile stuff from the 80s. You put the piece of paper in, it comes out the other fax machine. It's not the same piece of paper, Ray. It's a copy. It's at
At,
best a copy.
at best, right.
At best a copy. It's not you. You being copied into a machine would not be you. You are still you. Even if you take that wild theory of, okay, in order to copy everything of you, we have to actually destroy every part of you, like the whole teleportation thing. You actually have to be destroyed in one spot to be recreated in another spot. Let's say we do that. Okay, that does not still make the new machine me. That's not me. Me was destroyed, Ray. It no longer exists. Me is not that thing. That is just a bunch of data that can act like me, but it's not me. It's not. So yeah, Ray's a really smart idiot. It's kind of basic. I mean, seriously, this is a very basic thing.
It's
It's
basic if you know what a human is.
it's
It's not basic if you think that humans are
basic
just
if you understand
computers.
how a fax machine works. You're making a copy. How is that hard for anybody to understand? It's a copy, Ray. It's not you.
That's fair. Like that is a really
It's not
strange
you.
concept to
Now,
consider.
yeah, if you got copied into a machine and you went to bed that night and woke up the next morning, you would not wake up as a machine. You would still wake up as you, and the machine would wake up and think it's you. It's not the same. You're not the same thing. You don't just
What
get
would I'm
mind.
curious. I'm curious in terms of let's maybe simplify it to like LLM points. Like even if you did that, so barring the fact nobody actually knows where memories are all stored or how they're stored. Like
Right?
we'll just
Get
assume that gets figured out, which is fine. I don't think there's any issue with that, um, philosophically or theologically. So let's say you did that. It now becomes to me like Notebook LM. What is Notebook LM? It's source data, but it doesn't have a system prompt. It doesn't have a free will. Like you could then inquire of the source data. Hey, Chuck, what is your life like here? And what is this? And tell me about your kid and tell me about your work and what, and you could get answers. But if you don't do that, it's just going to sit there as source data. Information by itself doesn't have a system prompt. Am I wrong? Like, Rob, does that make sense? I'm curious if you've used NotebookLM, if that makes sense to what I'm saying there on the data source thing.
Yeah, it does. I just got this strong urge to search for. When I was young, I was a huge fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like that was my thing growing up. And did you ever watch
Oh,
it?
yeah,
Do you remember
Rob.
Krang?
Yeah.
It got me thinking about Krang, and it's probably not related, but like the super villain in it, right, was just a brain, like a blob of brain, and then sometimes in a glass box, and sometimes it was in a droid's body, and I'm kind of like, so the droid isn't Krang, but the brain is Krang, so it's kind of like Chuck's fax machine thing. I may have gone way off topic here. This is why you shouldn't let me sit for too long in silence, but that's yes, I think I'm getting it. I think I'm getting it. The Notebook LLM thing is kind of today's reference, not the 90s one.
I don't remember that from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but clearly they stole that from C.S. Lewis, The Hideous Strength. I mean, I don't know if you Brits are required to read some classic literature from C.S. Lewis or not, but are
All
you,
we read.
is anybody familiar with that story?
Nope.
It's basically exactly what he just said, which I totally forget from Ninja Turtles, but they made this brain that like existed outside of a body and was like their leader. And sorry if you haven't read the book because I just gave away like the climax, the ending. Um, but yeah, it was just interesting his ability to kind of see how people thought the world would actually work. And obviously point out a lot of issues and challenges with this concept along the way. But he did have the character, like he did assume, yes, this was possible to some degree. Um, but the point would be, could you have a brain? I guess what's your thought process with that, Rob? What's the connection?
Well,
I'm not even sure anymore, to be honest. But it was just, do you take the brain out of one thing? Because we were talking about downloading and uploading, and this is a little bit different. Assuming that they just take the brain and that's all that the human body is just the brain. And I think your book talks about the fact that it's not, because obviously the soul and everything else. But this is just taking the human, aka the brain, and putting it into something else, and then making a new human. But it's not like Chuck said. It's not. This is not a new Krang. This is Krang's brain and a droid's body.
Well, and I
It's
think it helps for people to understand the philosophy behind this, right? So, like, I point out Aquinas for a reason. And the biggest reason is because, like, he's right. Like, there's so many things, and we talk about this in the book of the antecedent will and the consequent will that he talked about then. And modern science, Nobel Prize went to um, the guy who just talked about the short and long term um, actions. I'll think of his name in a second. Daniel Kahneman, which was basically like exactly what Aquinas had described 700 years earlier. Never got a Nobel Prize for it, but this guy did by just proving it scientifically. So when you talk about our ability to have emotions or senses or memories and these being physical realities, that's totally fine. Like that's in line with the idea of human nature. And also, at that level, like I said before, that's animals' level of soul. But humans have a different step to it. And I think a lot of these guys like Kurzweil, Sam Harris would be another materialist that talks about some of these things, kind of just like stop there. They don't recognize there's a difference between an animal and a human. Peter Singer is probably the most famous for arguing that an adult pig is worth more than an infant child because it has more utility, which is horrifying to consider. But at some degree, he's right if all you believe we are is animals, if you don't recognize the rational soul. That's why this research from neuroscience is so crucial, because if you take the blinders off and say, what do we actually observe in the world? Then you see a very different story. the NDEs, the hydrocephalus, terminal lucidity, it's another one. Dementia patients that near the time of death, it could be up to a few weeks. Usually it's a few days or hours. They all of a sudden just are completely lucid. The brain isn't any better. They haven't changed physically, but for some reason they become lucid at that point of near death. So these are all things that point to an immaterial or at least separation between the mind and the brain. And in the neurosurgery research, like Mike Wagner's book, The Immortal Mind, is actually phenomenal because it goes through all this stuff. He's personally done over 7,000 brain surgeries. And he just talks about how different parts of the brain that we thought had different effects. Like, you guys are familiar with how they fix people with severe epilepsy? Like, one of the main ways to do that, like if medical treatments for um, prescriptions and medicines don't help, do you know how they can physically fix it?
I know there's a surgery, they split the brain, the halves of the brain.
Right. So they literally separate. So the left and the right hemisphere of the brains are no longer connected. And when that you do that, obviously the person becomes two different personalities and two different people. No, that's not what happens. It's still a one person with a single mind, but two separate brains. Congenital twins. There's a set of twins that shared a thalamus, part of their brain, right? And yet they can sense each other's like emotional states. They can control different parts of the body. Like one twin can control three of their exterior limbs. Another twin could do three of them. And so they had physical, so they could sense emotions. They could deal with the motor skills. Um, but neither of them could understand an abstract thought from the other. They still had independent worlds. They still had an independent inner world where they liked different things. Where one was like had a boyfriend and the other one didn't, and there was they're still very different minds, even though they share a brain and can even share physical functions within a connected body. So all of this says if you think the brain, Ray Kurzweil, is something you can just replicate with a neural network and therefore either create a god or a human level intellect or upload and live on forever and not just end up with NotebookLM. Um, show me the data. Like all the research shows that that's totally ridiculous and not viable.
Is there any more to say? I mean, I feel like what else can you say to that?
I don't know. I just kind of got a hankering for pizza though.